Welcome into Smoky Mountain Source. Today we're going to be talking about the Bell Witch of Appalachia. In Appalachia, there's a fine line between reality and perception, perhaps a finer line than anywhere else in the United States. Sometimes the line is blurred. One of those times is the legend of the Bell Witch. The Bell family was originally from North Carolina. In the early 1800s, only a few years before the haunting, the Bell family moved to Robertson County, Tennessee. John Bell purchased enough land to build a house and start a small farm. Over the years, he added more land to his property, ending up with hundreds of acres of farmland, and had a strange cave located on the land. The cave has since been placed on the National Historic Registry and allows visitors to tour the cave at their own risk. By all accounts, prior to the events, the Bell family was normal. Of course, that's what they say about every family or person that gets involved in some unexplainable mess. They were members of the local Baptist church, and John Bell even became an elder there. John Bell and his wife Lucy Bell, along with their children John Bell Jr., Drew Bell, and Betsy Bell, all had interactions with the witch, but the witch seemed focused on John Bell and his daughter Betsy Bell the most. It all began on a normal day in 1817, when John Bell was walking around his fields. Sitting in the middle of a cornfield was an animal with the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit. Obviously shocked by the unnatural appearance of the animal, Bell shot at it, but it disappeared right in front of his eyes. That same night, the entire family heard beating and banging sounds on the walls of their house. With every night that passed, sounds intensified. Several weeks went by with this strange occurrence happening every night, and when John and his sons would run out to find the source, they would return without any inkling as to what was making the noises. There would be many strange sightings over the next month, including individual experiences by the children. Drew Bell reported sighting an unknown bird perched on a fence. This bird was massive in size, unlike anything that lives on this planet or in this realm. Betsy Bell encountered a young girl in a green dress swinging from the limb of a tree. One of the family slaves, Dean, witnessed a strange black dog following him every night. The occurrences again ramped up as the children began to hear gnawing at night. They heard dogs fighting and swinging chains clattering against the floor. Pillows would be thrown across their room and bed sheets ripped from their cover, seemingly on their own. Soon, the entity began to fixate on Betsy Bell, a young woman to be engaged and married. The invisible entity would rip her hair and slap her, leaving nasty bruises all over her body. One night, John Bell began to suffer from paralysis inside of his mouth. The situation had escalated beyond what John or his family could handle. This is when the Bell family finally asked a friend for help. James Johnston, upon hearing of these weird happenings, decided to spend the night with the family in the Bell house. During the first night, Johnston heard the same noises the family had been hearing, including an old woman's voice singing Bible hymns. James Johnston was hit by something after the bed covers were pulled from him and his wife. The Johnstons immediately concluded that an evil spirit lived in the home. After this, the story spread like wildfire. Once the Bell family involved the Johnstons, the witch began speaking out loud. Claiming to be a disturbed spirit, but never settling on the same story twice, the witch tortured the families. Soon, the entity started carrying on long conversations about the Bible. It would even recite 2 different sermons given in 2 different churches the prior week. Brilliantly, Johnston's son James thought up a test for the witch. He asked the witch to tell him what his Dutch grandmother would have said to a slave she saw doing something wrong. The witch replied in James' grandmother's accent, the correct answer. This went on as others came to visit. Somehow, the entity would know what their ancestors sounded like and even replicated their beliefs. As news continued to spread of the haunting, even Andrew Jackson held an interest in the witch. During the War of 1812, John Bell Sr.'s sons had fought under Jackson at the Battle of New Orleans, so he had a link to the Bell family prior to hearing of the strange events taking place. Being the maverick he was, Andrew Jackson traveled to the Bells with his own entourage in search of an answer during 1819. Immediately upon entering the property, his wagon got stuck in the mud. As he tried to get the wagon loose, he heard the old witch's feeble voice, except the voice was coming from a disembodied figure floating. Jackson's group settled in for the night, but were awakened when a self-proclaimed witch tamer of the group began to shake and convulse uncontrollably. He screamed in agony, saying he was being stabbed over and over. Suddenly, he flew out the front door, with the entity calling the witch tamer a fraud, and vowed to find other frauds in the party. Being the stubborn man Jackson was, he refused to let his men leave until they found out more. The night passed without incident, but Jackson had clearly been spooked as he left out in the morning and never came back. Some even attribute the quote, "I would rather fight the British at New Orleans than fight the Bell Witch," to him that night. Regardless, the witch was terrorizing everyone and everything on the property. The entity soon turned its attention back to the Bell family, offering weird compliments to Lucy, John Bell's wife. Over time, the witch had focused on the life of Betsy Bell, John's daughter. Betsy had been engaged to Mary, but the witch made it clear that it did not approve of the marriage, and tortured her for it. The witch refused to leave Betsy or her groom-to-be Joshua alone, no matter where they went. Betsy eventually called off the engagement and received relief from the haunting of the witch, albeit temporary in nature. By the time the fall of 1820 arrived, John Bell had been experiencing health issues. Exacerbated by the Bell Witch, John's troubles took away time from his family and the farm. The witch put John through even more torture as he lay in bed sick. She hit him, slapped him, and threatened to kill him non-stop. On the morning of December 20th, 1820, John Bell was found dead in his bed. Wasting no time, the witch appeared to the family when they found a mysterious vial of black liquid. To test it, John Jr. gave a drop to the cat, which made it freak out. The cat jumped up and down, twisting in the air, and fell to the floor dead on the spot. That's when the witch admitted it. She claimed she killed John Bell by poisoning him with that vial of black liquid. John Jr. then threw the vial into the fire in anger, and when it hit the fire, it burst into a blue flame and went up the chimney. Tons of people came to pay their respects to John Bell at his funeral. Before leaving the graveyard, those in attendance could hear the Bell Witch laughing and singing as they left. Not much was seen of the witch after John Bell's death. Whether this meant it had completed its work or not was a question the family constantly raised to one another. As it turns out, the witch had visited Lucy Bell, John's widow, in 1821 after Betsy Bell broke off her engagement. The witch told Lucy that it would return in 7 years. In 1828, the witch returned, this time to John Bell Jr. The witch told him of the origins of life, of ancient civilizations, and of the future Civil War. After a few weeks of haunting, the Bell Witch vowed to come back in 107 years to visit John Bell's direct descendants. By the time 1935 came around, a man by the name of Dr. Charles Bailey Bell, John Bell Sr.'s great-grandson, published a book about the Bell Witch. Contained in the book were previously unknown accounts of encounters with the witch and the first-hand story of the Bell family's account of the haunting. No one knows if the witch ever visited again. Dr. Megan Mann, an assistant professor of chemistry from Austin Peay State University, began looking into the death of John Bell and the haunting in search of answers. While she never settled on an explanation for the ghost sightings, she thought she found an answer to John Bell's death. As the legend went, John Bell was poisoned by the Bell Witch. Dr. Mann started with this information as true in order to find an explanation for his untimely death. Immediately, she noticed some interesting pieces of information in the original tale. He had been suffering from unexplained symptoms that seemed neurological to her in nature. Descriptions of John Bell's mouth paralysis, trouble swallowing, and twitching seemed to her like symptoms of a neurological issue. Even the violent actions of shoes flying off his feet and his body contorting could have been examples of neurological problems. So she kept digging into her theory. She learned that the family doctor claimed that the infamous black liquid vial had the same smell that was present on John Bell and the cat after their deaths. Even when combining this with the neurological symptoms and the blue flame once the vial hit the fire, Dr. Mann admitted it could have been anything that killed John Bell. What she did note, however, was the direct correlation between neurological symptoms and heavy metal poisoning. In order to find the metal as the culprit, she needed one that satisfied the events that took place. That's when she thought about arsenic. Arsenic began to align with many of the symptoms and stories told during the haunting. It satisfied the blue flame and the twitching that John Bell suffered from. Arsenic was commonly found during that time, used to keep rat populations in check in barns and on farms. Perhaps the piece of the puzzle that tipped the scales for Dr. Mann was the cat's death. Dr. Mann noticed that arsenic is metabolized in the human body quickly, which allows us to recover from small doses almost instantly. However, cats do not have this same metabolic mechanism, and even one drop would cause death in a cat. This lined up perfectly with the story. Dr. Mann believes that John Bell was poisoned over time by arsenic, which led to the wild symptoms he suffered from and his eventual death. The only question now is who or what did it? Who had a motive for killing him beside the witch? It was commonplace for abused wives to murder their husbands in this way, but did Lucy actually do it? Was it the Bell Witch herself? Or someone else? When listening to an old folklore story, you always have to take the information with a grain of salt. That is not to say that the haunting of the Bell Witch is entirely fiction, though, because if there's one truth in life, it's that perception can be reality. If the Bell family truly believed they were being haunted, then the question of historical accuracy doesn't matter. The legend of the Bell Witch is largely considered to be the ghost story with the most primary source information to back it up, as many different people experience strange occurrences on the Bell property. As one of Appalachia's most defined and popular unexplainable stories, the Bell Witch will live forever in the minds of those who hear the story, and that is the ultimate goal of folklore, to never forget.